invite you all on the first thematic track of the World Sustainable Development Summit. The thematic track on building focuses on sustainable buildings in India, energy efficiency, resource efficiency, green cooling, and green design. India will need to build 700 to 800 million square meters of real estate per year for the next 2 decades. Currently, the building sector in India accounts for 29% of the total electricity consumption and around 437 million tons of CO2 emissions. The commercial sector is growing with 8% and the residential sector with 5% every year. The Housing for All scheme of the Government of India schedules to build 20 million houses by 2022. The global stock of room air conditioners is scheduled to grow from about 1.2 billion units today to 4.5 billion units by 2050, of which around 1 billion in India. The session aims at providing a concise overview of the main challenges for ensuring sustainable buildings that are resources and energy efficient, thereby resulting in reduction of energy use, pollution, waste, and greenhouse gas emission. With the given background, I would like to invite Mr. Sanjay Seth, Senior Director and Senior Fellow of the Sustainable Habitat Program at TEDI on the podium. Mr. Seth is also the Chief Executive Officer of Griha Council, which administers the green rating for integrated habitat assessment. Prior to joining TEDI, he worked with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India, and headed the vertical on building energy efficiency. He was also the interim secretary of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and responsible for administration and financial management of the organization. In this capacity, he provided oversight to the implementation of policies and programs of BEE, as well as the National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency. Please. I would also like to invite Mr. Edwin Quick, Counselor on Energy and Climate Action, Delegation of the European Union to India. Mr. Edwin studied environmental sciences at the Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. He worked for 7 years in the Netherlands Ministry of Environment, in the first 5 years as part of the Dutch delegation to the UN Climate Change Negotiation, the UN Aviation Organization, and the UN Maritime Organization. In the last 2 years as Senior Policy Advisor in the area of air quality. He then worked for almost 5 years for the Environment Committee of the European Union Parliament, inter alia, in the area of climate change and renewable energy. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Disha. Am I allowed to speak from here? Yes. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to have you here in this room, together with our partners, the European Union. This is the first session after the plenary that we are engaged in. Nothing better than sustainable buildings in India, energy efficiency, resource efficiency, green cooling, green design. I mean, it cannot be more emphasized than what we have as a topic for discussion. It's a privilege to be with many of you in this room who I've had the privilege of working and initiating many programs, even in my earlier capacity in the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and I continue to be working with many of you, even in my present role at TEDI. I have been given the onerous task of course, giving the opening remarks, and thereafter Edwin, of course, would be setting the tone for the discussions this morning. But I would like to, I don't want to kind of make it sound as if I'm giving an inaugural or the setting the track for the discussion. What I would want to do is leave a few numbers. I've done a lot of number crunching. I have got a piece of paper with all of these numbers before me, and I would like to share them with you all so that probably when we are discussing throughout the session, we would have these numbers playing somewhere behind in our minds so that we could see what we can really, the key takeaways could be centered around it. So I'll just start reading. Now, more than half of the world's population currently lives in urban areas, which will increase to about 68% by 2050. In the next 32 years, another 2.5 billion people are expected to live out of urban areas. 90% of these will be in Asia and Africa alone, and India would be responsible for a fifth of these numbers. It's, to be precise in terms of numbers, 400 million urban developers by 2050. In India, the share of contribution of urban areas to the national GDP is bound to increase to about 63% in 2009-10 to about 75% in 2030. The Niti Aayog estimates that per capita residential space in India will increase from 1.8 meters square in 2012 to 35 meters square in 2047, and the per capita commercial building space from 0.7 meters to 5.9 meters over the same duration. The building electricity demand projections as a consequent to this suggests a five-fold increase in electricity demand in the residential sector and a threefold increase in electricity demand in the commercial sector till 2047 over the baseline of 2011. This will amount to a total projected electricity demand of 2611 terawatt hours by 2047 alone from the building sector. Demand for electricity in the commercial building sector is primarily linked with the cooling demand from the sector. The expected cooling demand from the sector in the next decade is estimated to more than double itself by over the 2017 baseline, and hence the expected increase for the overall electricity demand for the commercial sector is anticipated. Globally, the building sector accounts for 40%. This is something which we all know. 40% of energy usage, 25% of water, and 40% of the global resources, and contributes to about 20% of the GHG emissions. In the last decade, we have been able to set standards for construction, architecture, and planning, which ambitiously sets goals for reducing the energy demands of buildings like the ECBC 2017. And I'm very glad that I have my colleague Saurabh Didi from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, who administers this program in BE, consequent to I left, and which aims at providing 20 to 40% more efficient buildings than conventional. Even though India's green building market is estimated to double by 2022, driven by increasing awareness levels, environmental benefits, and government support, the perception that green costs more and does not have an economically attractive payback is the biggest stigma that is attached to it. And I think that that's one of the key things that we need to really work around. Studies place that in case existing and planned policies are implemented, the share of buildings in total energy consumption could come down to about 23% by 2040, as against the present consumption of about 40%. So in my opinion, I think the panelists who are going to come in after this short introduction by me and Edwin would be to discuss their views on current energy efficiency regulation and programs, and how do we bridge the gap on compliance with established building norms. Now I'm saying it very easily now, since I've left that and I'm switched on to the other side. So Saurabh, I would want answers from you and the other panelists. Of course, one must understand that the simple equilibrium of demand and supply will always dictate market dynamics, and unless and until the user demands to grow green, the markets will not deliver green. And that's why I say that consumers are the center of this entire initiative that we are doing. Unless and until we ourselves demand for green, none of these developers are going to give us green. I also would like to delve upon two of the important programs which I am currently leading in, and that is the Sustainable Housing Leadership Consortium with the IFC and EU intends to drive sustainability in India's housing sector. The aim is to make 20% of India's new housing construction sustainable by 2022. IFC has engaged TERI for technology lever for green housing scale-up in India, the project that intends to identify and prioritize building technologies to achieve at least 20% reduction in the incremental cost of growing green. And I am very glad that the IFC the leadership is provided by Shruti Narayan, who is here today as a panelist from IFC. The other project which I would really like to share with you all is the mainstreaming Sustainable Social Housing in India, MASHIP, which is a research initiative by the Low Carbon Building Group at the Oxford Brookes University, TERI, Development Alternatives, and UN Habitat, and is financially supported by the Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program of the 10 5-year program of Sustainable Consumption and Production, the 10 by FP. The project aims to identify what the impacts and benefits of housing production at scale, such that of the Housing for All by 2022 mission could be for our environment, our economy, and our communities, and to provide a method for identifying the most optimal building materials and technologies. So this is very, very important, especially given the data poor data poor environment that we work in. I think this project is, we've just finished the project and we've submitted the reports. We have come up with some very fantastic tools, which we would want you all to, probably during the course of our discussions in the WSDS, we will have opportunities to share what we have done and what we have developed there. So with these words, I welcome you all to this session, and I am privileged to be hosting this along with my colleague from the EU, Mr. Edwin, and as Disha had called him, it's Cuckoo, okay? Am I right?
That's fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, distinguished colleagues, it's a great pleasure indeed to welcome you at this track on sustainable buildings in India. It's organized by TERI and the European Union, and for me it was the first time since I'm here. I arrived in September to work together with TERI, and I really enjoyed the cooperation. I would like to say a few words on the European Union and also on our cooperation with India. So as you know, the EU consists of 28 member states, and it's one big single market with common targets and common legislation in the area of inter alia climate change, renewables, energy efficiency, and recently also electricity market design, but also legislation on eco-design and also on circular economy. Comparable to India with 29 states, the EU has 28 member states with big ones like Germany, France, still the UK, Italy, Spain, Poland, and also slightly smaller ones, but often also big economies like my country, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, the Czech Republic, and the 3 Baltic states. The EU has 24 languages, so also there is a big diversity like here in India. The motto is united in diversity. I think for India it's unity in diversity. We have 50 crore people. We are a big democracy, and we will have, like you, elections for the European Parliament in May. In the area of clean energy and climate action, India is a key partner for the European Union. At the EU India Summit in 2016, Prime Minister Modi agreed with the European leaders on a clean energy and climate partnership. This partnership was then reconfirmed in 2017 and recently also in the EU strategy on India. We try to work on very concrete, often technical initiatives on the ground, inter alia in relation to offshore wind, to solar parks, we have a rooftop solar program. We work together on the implementation of energy efficiency in buildings. We work together on smart grids, on greenhousing, on urbanization. On your tables, you find a brochure explaining all the different things we are doing together with India in the area of sustainable development. It's important to also mention our cooperation in the area of research and innovation through our research and innovation program, Horizon 2020. And we have strongly invited India to participate in this program and to work together with the EU stakeholders in those areas which are of mutual interest. And on energy, in particular, after the launch of the Mission Innovation Initiative at the Climate Conference in Paris in 2015, we also work together, and both India and the European Union are strongly involved. So today's track is organized under a new large project for the coming 3 years, which is currently still in the inception phase. It's the so-called India-EU Clean Energy and Climate Partnership. And this program will focus on renewable energy, energy efficiency, the required infrastructure, so on the grid and storage, on climate action, and on climate financing. Again, the objective is to even strengthen more our cooperation with India, and this means between the European institutions and India, but also between the European member states and India, in the area of clean energy and climate action. So our implementing partner is PricewaterhouseCoopers India, and I'm very happy that Mr. Rajiv Kalyan will give a short presentation setting the scene. So he will be the one setting the scene, addressing the different issues that we want to address today. So energy efficiency, cooling, resource efficiency, and the design of buildings. On your tables, you should also find a one-pager describing the project, so the CSCP. And in this project, buildings will be an important area with important challenges in the area of energy efficiency, cooling, and resource efficiency. So in this session, we try to look in a holistic way at the challenges related to the building sector, also with the important concept of the circular economy in mind, looking at the whole life cycle of buildings, its design, its maintenance, and the end of life of the materials and applications used. So please allow me to congratulate Terry with this very important summit addressing sustainable issues that really matter in India, but also matter for the rest of the world. I would like to warmly thank Terry, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the moderator, and the panelists, and you, the public, for being here. As you will hopefully see, the idea of the session is to have a very interactive session with concrete messages and concrete conclusions that can feed into our EU-India cooperation, but also in the work of the BEE, of Terry, of the NRDC, of the AEEE, the IFC, the National Housing Bank, and the AFD. So thank you very much, and I wish all of you a very fruitful session. Thank you.
Over to you, Disha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Seth and Mr. Edwin. I now request Mr. Sanjay Seth to please hand over the moment of appreciation to Mr. Edwin. We will now start with the panel discussion. I request Mr. Nicholas Fanaj, Country Director India, Regional Director of India and Bangladesh, AFD, to please come over the podium. Mr. Nicholas Fanaj holds an MSc in Civil Work and Water Engineering and is a Senior Chief Engineer of the French administration. His area of expertise are on renewable energy and hydropower, urban water and sanitation, climate change and environmental and social due diligence. He is a member of the International Hydropower Association. After several contracts in African countries for the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he was recruited by AFD in 1999 and has worked since in France, in Africa, and in Asia. He was appointed in August 2015 as the Regional Director for French Development Agency in South Asia. He's based in New Delhi and covers AFD's intervention in India and Bangladesh. Thank you for accepting our invitation as the moderator for the session, sir. I now invite Mr. Rajiv Rilhan, Director with PricewaterhouseCoopers in Clean Energy Space. Rajiv has more than 18 years of experience in energy efficiency domain. He has been part of many prestigious programs in the field of appliance standard, building codes, building labeling program, cooling initiatives, and fuel efficiency programs. Rajiv has been advising on these initiatives in India as well as in Asia, Africa, and Middle East region. Rajiv is working as National Coordinator under BEE EU Program for Energy Efficiency in Buildings. Rajiv is supporting 4 states, namely Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, and Bihar for adoption of ECBC. Mr. Rajiv Rilhan, please. I now request Mr. Saurav Didi, Director, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, to please come over the podium. Mr. Didi has more than 15 years of professional experience combining intellectual and managerial experience in the field of energy efficiency, climate change, green growth, and global carbon market. As Director in Bureau of Energy Efficiency, India, his primarily responsibilities are to provide strategic, technical, and operational guidance for the Bureau's knowledge and policy programs in the energy sector. Formulated and managed National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency and the National Action Plan for Climate Change India. The NMEEE program targeted to unleash investment worth 12 billion US dollars in energy efficiency in India. I now invite Mr. Jake Schmidt, Managing Director of NRDC's International Program. Mr. Jake is leading a team of experts and partners working on climate change, clean energy, biogems, and sustainable development in India, Latin America, Canada, and at the international level. He works closely with the organization's China team on climate issues and help coordinate NRDC's international effort to tackle the challenges of health, ocean, and wildlife. I now request Dr. Satish Kumar to please come over the podium. He's the President and Executive Director of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. In his current role, he has led AEEE's transformation into a leading energy efficiency policy think tank and business enabling entity through a combination of thought and programmatic leadership, collaboration and partnership with Indian and global public, private, and peer organizations, and fundraising. He has served as a senior energy efficiency advisor or technical expert in energy efficiency to the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change. Niti Aayog, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Bureau of Indian Standard, and Department of Science and Technology, Confederation of Energy Efficiency. Mr. Cornelius Rehn. Mr. Rehn is a German lawyer and works for the European Commission since 2000. From 2007 on ozone depletion substances and fluorinated greenhouse gases. He participates in the meeting of the Montreal Protocol and was involved in the drafting and negotiation of the EU regulation on fluorinated greenhouse gases. Since 2018, he coordinates within the Directorate General for Climate Action the relationship with India. Professor Ashok B. Lal, Principal Architect at the Ashok B. Lal Architects. Professor Ashok graduated from the University of Cambridge, UK in Architecture, Fine Arts and obtained the Architectural Association Diploma in 1970. His architectural firm is committed to an architectural practice based on the principles of environment sustainability and social responsibility. It has won a number of awards and its work has been published widely. Engaged in architectural education since 1990, he has developed curricula and teaching methods to address the same. Now I invite Ms. Shruti Narayan, lead Green Building Program IFC on the podium. Ms. Shruti is leading the Green Building Program in India. She is an architect with over 16 years of experience globally in buildings, sustainability, and resource efficiency. Her focus is on developing quantitative structures to address green buildings through an ecosystem approach. Lastly, I would like to invite Mr. Manohar Mirayala on the podium. He's a banker with more than 23 years of experience in banking across PSU, private and foreign banks, extensively associated with bank treasury, trading, profit maximization, resource raising, investment, risk management, and technical analysis. I now hand over the stage to our moderator, Mr. Nicholas Fanaj.
Thank you very much, Disha. It was a very good introduction. Thank you for that. As you know, I'm working for French Development Agency. I'm very glad to be here for many reasons. One of them is the fact that we are invited by Terry. Thank you, all my warm thanks to Terry for hosting this seminar. We have been working for Terry with Terry in partnership with them for a very long time. So it's always a pleasure to come here. Also, we have been working in India for the past 10 years in very close association with our European friends. So I'm very honored to have been requested by EU and Terry to be the moderator of this panel. Also, not to mention the fact that as a French citizen, I'm also a European citizen, and we are also very much part of this huge push from European Union on fighting climate change and finding appropriate solution for sustainable development. So, as a moderator, I will just give some house rules from the beginning. To say that we first, as explained, are going to have a general presentation on the sector and the challenges of the sector by Mr. Rajiv Radhan from PwC. After that, we'll go directly to the panelist discussion, but we'll do something special. We'll separate that in 3 sessions. So first session would be on energy efficiency in buildings. Second session would be on green cooling, and third session would be on design and building strategies. After each session, we'll do a short Q&A session, so in order to keep lively exchange with the room. So I will ask the panelists to limit themselves to 3 to 5 minutes max, in order to give some floor for the discussion afterwards. And of course, after that, we'll have also a conclusion, and we'll finish our work with this panel. So, first of all, let's switch the floor to Mr. Rajiv Radhan from PwC to give his global presentation on the sector.
Thank you, Nicholas. So, good morning, everybody. So, I'm asked to maybe set the context, but Seth Sab has already set the context by giving so many numbers. So, without wasting time, for 3 to 5 minutes, I'll just run through what is the whole idea of this discussion. We have so many experts here. So we all are aware that what kind of challenges we are facing. No need to go into the numbers, but the key drivers here is that building sector is close to 30% of the total electricity consumption. We are closely working with Bureau of Energy Efficiency on many initiatives. The initial estimates which we have is that we are targeting that maybe close to 1 billion meters square of new commercial space and more than 3 billion meters square of new residential space we are targeting by 2030. India will have. We all have been talking about different numbers of increase in demand, but yes, we are sure that it is going to be multiplied twice, thrice in times to come. So the urgency of tackling the energy efficiency, resource efficiency in the building sector is the priority. What are the policies mandate for the building sector? BE is leading this initiative on building codes, 2007, 2017, and okay, it's not working here, okay. So 2007 building code for commercial building, the next version is 2017, and we all are working closely with BE that how this gets implemented at national level. ECBCR for residential building is already there. BE is already working on rating systems. Commercial we already have, and it is getting enhanced, strengthened. Residential, they are coming up with a labeling program. Then integration of energy efficiency in the housing schemes. We talk about the urbanization, smart cities. As a PwC and of course many other agencies, they are working with the state level authorities, municipal authorities, that how this energy efficiency is linked with the smart cities concept. So what are the challenges? As of now, 13 states have notified ECBC commercial. BE is putting a lot of efforts that it gets adopted in many states. And it is not simply about adopting, it is more about that how it leads to implementation. So a lot of work needs to be done. How do we say that this ECBC or building energy efficiency, do we have a market push for this? We have seen that in last so many years, the implementation is not, the adoption is not that fast. So that is one of the ideas here, that how do we make it happen? What is the market push required to make a business case out of this? Institutional capacity, many different members here, they are working in different states and working with different organizations, institutions. But institutional capacity remains one of the key challenges which is important to be addressed if we want our building energy efficiency policies to be addressed. That's where we need a debate here. And I already talked about the business case or market-based instruments, what kind of instruments we can have, so that rather than a policy push, it becomes kind of a business case for the different stakeholders. Next, please. Cooling. We have our India Cooling Action Plan, we have some numbers, and we all are talking about that how much new construction is coming up in next few years. New construction means that we are going to have more cooling requirements. That how do we address this issue? That remains one of the priority, that when this new construction is coming, the cooling demand is going to increase. What kind of measures can we have? So that is also one of the discussion points here, that how do we address this cooling issue in India in buildings. That remains the main contributor if you look at the India Cooling Action Plan also. In terms of residential, the penetration rate as of now in India is very low, maybe 8%, and the targets are that maybe it will rise to 21% and 40% in future. So if we are seeing new addition of these air conditioning appliances or systems, can we control the inflow of these kind of appliances into our market so that we have a reduced demand? That remains one of the discussion points. And similarly, in the commercial segment, we are expecting that this number is going to grow much. Next, please. So the other area here is that we are talking about the building policies, we are talking about cooling and issues. How do we address it? Then there's one more discussion on resources, energy, water. We talked about energy, but water, waste, emissions, and all that. How do we address this issue in buildings? Because the energy efficiency policies, they are not talking about water, waste, and all that. Thereafter comes the issue of the green concept. Many organizations, including IFC, they are pushing hard to take forward, TERI, IGBC, to take forward this idea of green buildings in India. Maybe we would like to discuss today that where do we stand now and how do we make it happen that maybe the penetration becomes good. And then the third idea here is the circular economy. We have started talking about circular economy, but maybe can we link it with our existing policies now? Because when we are saying that so much of new construction is coming up, so much waste is going to be generated in future, how do we link it with the existing policies? That remains one of the discussion points. So what are the priorities? This is my last slide before I give to Nicholas. That how do we reduce this energy consumption and emission? That is one priority which we need to discuss, that whatever existing we are doing now and what additional we need to do. How can we adopt these resource efficient designs or techniques? Can we have it? And EU has been very particular that if we need to have some kind of a know-how transfer or technology transfer, that is also very important. What kind of market transformation or business potential for energy efficient materials? We all have been talking about maybe increment in cost of a building because of energy efficient materials. But how can we create some kind of a business model, maybe that with the time the cost of these materials reduces? Skills is one area where maybe we need to talk about that, how skills help us in taking forward this journey. And then how do we strengthen or scale up this research in the existing program? So this is from my side. Nicholas.
Thank you very much. So Rajiv, it was a very good way of setting up the frame for this discussion today. Thank you for that. It's also an excellent introduction for the three sessions we're going to organize, three sub-sessions we're going to organize. I would like to begin with the first panelist. So actually my neighbor, Mr. Saurabh Didi. I just remember the first time I met with Ajay Mathur, he was actually the head of Bureau of Energy Efficiency. It was already some years ago. But so we have, as AFD, we had a strong partnership with Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and we welcome your contribution regarding what you can bring us regarding how to increase energy efficiency in the building. So floor is yours.
Very good morning to all of you. Although it's very difficult to speak when Mr. Seth, because who was taking care of buildings program in Bureau, he said everything. Then Rajiv, because he is working with Bureau and in his presentation, he made everything that what we are doing. So, but thankfully, 2-3 things you left, so I can speak on that. Number one, if we talk about buildings, as Mr. Seth said that building is going to increase manifolds. And I link it here with the cooling demand as well, so that that manifold only not in terms of existing to new buildings, but in terms of total demand of electricity will actually manifolds than the demand of construction or construction which is going to happen. If we link both, then you can imagine how many times this energy demand will go up. If we look at residential buildings, it is estimated that by 2030, it will be roughly in the range of 3 billion square meters. And it will turn to 6 billion square meter by 2050. And if today 8% is cooling demand, or the people who are using air conditioner, and if it is going to 30 or 40 or even actually more, then we can imagine this 4 times electricity consumption will actually turn to 8 times or 9 times. So this is a significant, there will be a significant increase in energy consumption if we talk about building sector alone. And I'm sure that this right now, 33 or 34% of total electricity consumption will be the highest actually, or it will go to more than 50% in by 2030 or 2050. So that is the potential what we have in building sector. Now, energy efficiency plays a significant role. If we talk about energy efficiency from the building perspective, whether it's a building design, 30 to 40% is energy saving potential. And if we look at energy saving with respect to air conditioners, and what we have achieved so far in Bureau is like 25% or more than 25% energy efficiency have been already improved for air conditioners. But if this is going to remain same, the trends, then also we will have 100 gigawatt of connected load, 100 to 140 watt of gigawatt of connected load only because of air conditioner by 2030. So you can imagine that how much energy saving is required. We have a few people here who can actually work on energy efficiency for air conditioners aspect, so that how we can reduce that demand. So we have to actually double or more than double this efficiency as well. Now, Bureau right now is working on residential building code, which we have launched on 14th of December last year. This was the part 1 of the building code, and based on only building design or building envelope, I'll say, so that we can reduce demand of air conditioning, or we can improve comfortable hours. So I'm not saying only air conditioned homes, but even the homes which are not having air conditioners will be more comfortable, or will have more comfortable hours over the years. Second thing what we are working on is we are working on residential building label. So tomorrow we have a meeting at Ministry of Power for its approval. So hopefully it will be launched by end of this month. That residential building label will be for each home will have a star rating program. And it will have a similar kind of a nameplate as you must be seeing on your air conditioners or refrigerators. So there will be a nameplate where you can see star rating and your name. So, and there will be a building passport, which will be a dynamic document and which can be downloaded from the website. And this will not only show what is your EPI values or how energy performance of your building, but it will also show you that how you can improvise your building or how you can improvise your home. So these two things we are right now working on, apart from what they have told about ECBC 2017 and all. Last thing which I would like to mention here is that we are also working on materials, that how we can improvise, how these materials could be provided for the construction of energy efficient homes, where we have collaborated with Terry. Terry is supporting us along with GIZ, and I think 5,000 materials will be identified. But identification is one thing, that cost economics and how you can utilize that is also important. So what we will do, we will develop a tool so that you can select any material, and as per your conditions, you can see whether it is economical for you or not. So it is not only energy saving, but with respect to how much money you are going to invest and how much energy you will save. So all those things we are working on in the materials aspect. I'll not take much time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was perfect on the spot regarding not only the challenges faced with the energy efficiency in building sector, but also with possible solutions. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure we'll get back to that maybe in the Q&A session. I wanted now to give the floor to Mr. Jake Schmidt from NRDC, National Resources Defense Council. You are implementing a program called ECBC, so Energy Conservation Building Code. So I would like you to give us some insight regarding the progress and the challenges you face for that.
Great, and yes, thank you very much. So I don't need to repeat, I think, all of the factoids of why building energy efficiency is such a critical component. So I'll skip over that because I think this is obviously a pretty educated room on that. So what I'm going to speak to is, I think, sort of two parts of a three-part piece of how to move forward, and other folks will talk about some of the cooling aspects. So NRDC worked a number of years ago with the Administrative State Staff College of India in Hyderabad on helping the state of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh to adopt the ECBC as a mandatory code. And so in 2014, both of those states and then split, or the single state and then split, adopted ECBC as a mandatory code for all commercial buildings. And just last year, the state of Telangana made that an online compliance system to make it easier for buildings to bring forward the compliance, but as well to make sure that we could track progress over time, because we know that sort of compliance is one of the key challenges. At the September summit in California, the state of Telangana announced and has moved forward with a requirement that all the major cities in Telangana adopt both the ECBC for all the cities, the major cities, as well as the online compliance system. And the state of Andhra Pradesh is moving forward with the online compliance system as we speak. So huge, I think, progress. These are two very important leading states in ECBC compliance. In the state of, or in the city of Hyderabad, over 50 commercial buildings have gone through this system, which is a pretty significant amount of effort. And I think for most part, they found it hopefully relatively easy and relatively ensured compliance with the system. We are now working with the state of Telangana to update it to the new ECBC standard and to make the new ECBC standard a part of the mandatory code compliance, as well as the online compliance system. I think the third piece I want to the second piece I want to just emphasize just a little bit is we've been working in both Ahmedabad and in Hyderabad on a Cool Roofs program, which is another component of this. From our experience, this is both a sort of a win-win for commercial buildings, residential buildings, but also for low-income communities, because it can reduce the cooling demand in all those places and also make it really critical in terms of saving lives, because as excuse me, as the heat rises, we need to create sort of better comfort for people. So two of the things I'll just leave you with from our experience. We worked with the state of Telangana and Hyderabad and did a sort of consultation with a number of the building developers, real estate developers, et cetera. And a couple lessons. These will be sort of, I think, very sort of common knowledge, but I think it's important to move, as more states move forward with them, important to sort of keep in mind. The first is that, creating adequate awareness about the efficiency across the stakeholders is a critical step forward. So case studies, training workshops, those kinds of things, they're sort of standard par for the course, but they are really important because there's a huge segment of the real estate and the builder community that just doesn't know about these pieces. The second piece, no brainer, but engaging government officials across the spectrum, building that capacity and engaging them sort of really early in the process is critical. The third lesson is bring in the real estate developers very early. So in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, we worked very closely with the real estate community to design the program, got buy-in for them. For the real estate community, it's often a way to sort of have the high performance people pull the rest of the market up so that the high performance people don't get sort of undercut by the lower end of the spectrum. The third, and I think we have a couple of experts on the panel here, or the fourth is to make sure you bring in the designers and the technical expertise quite early into the process. So there's a huge set of technical engineering expertise, architects, and leading folks. And the last piece is not shocking, but local officials tend to be sort of under-resourced, and so finding ways to sort of bring the pieces forward, in terms of knowledge, skill sets is sort of critical. So to kind of wrap you up with, I think, two sort of anecdotes on both of those. I was just in Hyderabad over the weekend, and I think two things to kind of leave this group with. So the building, the CII building, the green building in Hyderabad, is just about to become a net zero building. It's a building built in 2001, or designed in 2001, built in 2003. So state of the art at the time, probably not state of the art today. Maybe it is in some sense. And so they're going to add a relatively small additional rooftop solar to the building, which is not that large. And I would say the critical step for going from an old building with state-of-the-art energy efficiency to net zero is because they had made significant energy efficiency investments over time. So the actual demand that they have of heating and cooling is quite small in that building. And then the last sort of conclusion for folks is to make sure, we've been thinking about, as you roll out ECBC standards more broadly, things like mandatory cool roofs for commercial buildings, for residential buildings. It may be about sort of bringing tools that the government can bring, training workshops, educational materials, because the cool roofs pay for themselves, but there's obviously usually a sort of a barrier to information. And then I think it's really important to provide some incentives for cool roofs for low-income communities, because that's really about sort of saving lives and bringing improved comfort, especially as heats increase. So with that, I'll be happy to stop.
Thank you very much, Jake. It was great to hear about this online compliance system in Telangana, because it's a nice fusion between Digital India and Housing for All. So thanks a lot for all this grassroots experience from Telangana. So I guess we have finished our first session regarding energy efficiency. So I would like to bring in the room. So if you have, I would take two questions. This question can also be related to first presentation by Mr. Rahan. So please don't hesitate to ask any question. So clearly, you have here some points of discussion, some question we ask regarding energy efficiency in building. So it can be question from the floor. It can also be a contribution from you. Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists for a great introduction to this, energy efficiency buildings. Just a point to note that, we're talking about this for the last 3 years, maybe. Why is awareness raising still an issue? A very basic question. But I still feel we are all talking about, the main thing what Jake raised is awareness raising and understanding, which Mr. Sanjay said that it's not increased costs, it's the returns that you get over a period of time. So why we are not able to hit that and get over awareness raising and come to more projects and demonstrations? What is the obstacle here?
Well, sorry if I gave you the impression that awareness raising and capacity building is all that we need to do. I think, from our experience, and it's true in India, it's true in China, it's true in the US, it's true elsewhere, like government policy has to set that minimum floor. So the awareness raising is important. in the build into that policy and then after it's implemented. But especially you're always going to have, I think, a sort of innovative, cutting set of buildings that are going to be built to like high efficiency standards. But you need to set a minimum standard so that everybody comes along, and that's why having a mandatory ECBC compliance, I think is quite critical. I would probably wager a bet that the 50 buildings in Hyderabad, we wouldn't have 50 if it weren't for the mandatory ECBC. You would sort of have some segment that would do kind of cutting edge and they'd be green buildings, but a fair amount of them would not have sort of come along if it weren't for that sort of minimum floor. So it's kind of, critical component. And I think the other reality is, once the real estate community is on board, they tend to roll pretty fast with actually implementing of it because, as we all know, these things pay for themselves really easy. And it's about sort of making sure that people sort of move forward with these quite quickly because, they're pretty bankable projects. I mean, you're talking about, 1 to 2 years difference in terms of payback period. That's a pretty good investment, even in today's market.
So, Mr. Didier?
Now, question is awareness of whom? Now, we have different type of stakeholders. Number one, when it is mandatory, then why we need awareness? Because it has to be implemented. But still, whether state, because state government is implementing, so awareness of state government, awareness of developers who will actually construct those buildings, or the people who will demand for it. Best part is if people demand for it. Then only things will move. And then you don't need any mandatory regime. Even if we look at star labeling program in India, people asked for that, and even if we'll not make it mandatory, still it will work. So mandatory is not the right way to do, but in this case, because it is not being implemented, we are working on. Now, awareness of every entity is important here. We are working for architects. We are raising awareness to them so that they don't only design from the viewing aspect of buildings, but also from the energy efficiency. We are working with all the state governments. So at least 30 programs we are conducting in each state right now, so that we are giving awareness to each and every person in those states. It is taking time, but things are changing. Now, I can say that within next 3 months, we are, although elections are there, so that's why it's a bit slow, but within 3 months, 3 to 4 months, every state will notify this. So that level we have achieved so far. In each state, right now, notification is at least with law section with them. So all those notifications are ready. Either they are with the law or for the cabinet approval. So that kind of level we have achieved so far. So this 13 will actually turn to 30 in a couple of months, I'll say. But still, awareness is an issue. I agree to that, but we are working on it. Thank you.
Excellent. I guess it was a perfect answer. This awareness issue is very important. I'm sure that we will come back to it and with the interesting question of awareness versus mandatory programs, obligations. So let's now, because time is running, let's go directly to the second session now. Second session will be about green cooling. First I would like to introduce Dr. Satish Kumar, who is here. So from AEEE, Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy. So please tell us about this subject.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fornaj, and I would like to express my sincere thanks to Terry and WSDS for giving an opportunity to AEEE. I've been asked to speak on green cooling, so I think I would like to touch upon 5 points during my intervention. And before I do that, I just want to say that why in India and around the world probably cooling has become such an important topic. We use a word or we use a phrase called a perfect cooling storm, and I think that's what India is facing. we have a large population, about 1.3 billion people. We have a largely tropical climate. If you look at in terms of the cooling degree days, I think India is about 40 to 50% hotter than most of the big urban centers that we are looking at, whether it's in China, in the US, or in Europe. If we are looking at rising aspirations of people, and everybody desires to have a more comfortable life beyond food, home, and shelter. So I think air conditioners starts to appear high on priority beyond fans, beyond refrigerators, beyond two-wheelers. So I think these are some of the things that are going to drive the cooling demand. We have heard some numbers, whether it's 100 gigawatt or 200 gigawatt. I think it's a matter of assumptions and projections, but it is going to be a fairly sizable demand in the future. So what should India do? I think why and how it can provide what we are calling for thermal comfort for all. I think that's the first point that I would like to make, that with a 1.3 billion population, with a very uneven income levels, there has to be a national goal or a target where thermal comfort for all becomes a priority. And that is important because I think there are many policies that are in play right now. Of course, we have heard about building energy efficiency policies. ECBC is one of the most important ones, and with the residential one coming into play, I think this will become probably an even more important point. When we talk about thermal comfort for all, I think the importance of first principles like the science, building physics, policy, design and construction, and I think human behavior, all of these become extremely, extremely important in terms of how do we accomplish it. And fortunately, I think there has been some really good quality work that has been done. And one thing that I would like to emphasize especially is the adaptive thermal comfort work that has come out of CEPT University. I think it has taken India a while. I think ASHRAE started to, steer into the adaptive thermal comfort model a while ago. But I think it has been proved conclusively that people who are born in tropical climate, they tend to prefer higher temperature, and that could have a significant bearing in terms of the resilience of the design, in terms of the energy implications of the design. At AEEE, we actually did some study to look at the national energy savings estimate if we adopt thermal comfort standards. And what we are finding out is that for each degree Celsius rise in temperature, if you go from 22 degrees Celsius to 27 degrees Celsius, the impact could be like 6 to 8% of energy consumption per degree Celsius. So that's, I think, that's a low-hanging fruit, and that is so, so important, I think, in terms of some of the things that can be done without spending a whole lot of effort and without, I think, some of the challenges that we face in policy implementation. The second part that I would say is that we need to adopt, I think some speakers before me have spoken about that, but I'm just using a term that we tend to use at AEEE. It's also part of our Thermal Comfort for All publication, what we call lean, mean, and green. And I think by lean, mean, and green, I think the idea is that you place the biggest emphasis on design. And I think that's why, again, ECBC becomes so important. And you design the buildings from the first principles, and you do the right things, do all of them, and do all of them in the right order. I think that's what I think is most important. And so the focus on sustainable design to reduce cooling load, then you use or deploy most energy efficient appliance or equipment to satisfy those load, whether it's energy efficient lighting or cooling or cooking, whatever that may be. And then the last thing that you need to do is to think about renewables and is to think about, I think, green refrigerant and a lot of other things. But if you reverse this process, then you are not going to actually get all the benefits and at the right level. So I think this is also something that I think net zero energy building asks for, and it's a very simple, I think, formulation that I think everybody needs to really understand, and rather than rushing to kind of do some showcase things which can get, I think, good publicity, I think it's a very basic thing that needs to be done. Role of innovation, R&D, I think that is, there is a prize that we are involved in under the Mission Innovation Scheme, Global Cooling Prize, and it is calling for disruptive innovation in the appliance design, which is not like 10-20%, but we are looking at 5x impact, I think, on grid, which is the kind of things that we also need to do given the challenges that we are facing. And lastly, I would say that the role of India Cooling Action Plan, which is something that has been developed with the help of many ministries, and where an attempt has been made to look at economy-wide cooling and refrigeration requirement, and what will be the role of policy, what will be the role of technology, what will be the role of R&D in the context of both refrigerant and non-refrigerant cooling, as well as I think the capacity building, and whether it's service technician, whether it's central plant staff for better operation and maintenance of staff. So India is definitely going beyond Kigali mandate, because it is looking at, I think, cooling in a much more holistic manner, and that's the need of the hour. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's clear for everybody that green cooling is a very important part of fighting climate change. If we can succeed into that, it would be a crucial point of fighting climate change. So now I would like to introduce to give the floor to Mr. Cornelius Rein. It's very interesting. We are going to expand a bit. We're only talking about India, but now it's a good moment to talk a bit about EU and what you are supporting at EU level regarding green cooling.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all. Indeed, I start nevertheless with the international perspective, because in a recent publication, the International Energy Agency described cooling as one of the blind spots of the international climate policy, which is one of the most critical energy issues that is often overlooked. I can say that in the EU we looked at the cooling sector relatively early on, also from the climate perspective, by adopting legislation on the refrigerants and on reducing and containing refrigerants which are very potent greenhouse gases as such. But in the same time, on a second strand, also to address the energy efficiency of cooling, air conditioning, and refrigeration equipment, both by mandatory energy efficiency standards and associated labeling requirements. So we have a two-track approach, focusing the direct emissions of refrigerants, which are harmful as such, but in the same time also securing the savings through measures on energy efficiency. That led us also to push quite hard to come to an inclusion of HFCs, the most potent and most often used replacements for the ozone-depleting substances, into the Montreal Protocol. And there we listened very carefully to the Indian negotiators, who were quite reluctant to take on early commitments on reducing refrigerants, also with a clear remark about the strategic and vital role of cooling and the availability of refrigeration for India and its expected growth we heard about this morning. There in Europe, the situation is a bit easier. We are a more saturated market, but for India it is indeed a huge challenge. We adopted and anticipated an agreement under the Montreal Protocol, which we reached in 2016 in Kigali, with a very good compromise. We anticipated this agreement by anticipating a phase down of HFCs domestically. At the beginning, when we developed this legislation, industry and many stakeholders, especially from the south side, it's impossible to replace certain appliances. But in the meantime, technology has advanced, and this development, which we triggered by our domestic legislation, will also benefit India and the rest of the world when it comes to a transition away from ozone-depleting substances and HFCs. But of course, we faced also some problems and identified some problems to tackle, and that is mainly qualification, skill, and awareness of the sector, in particular the servicing sector. Because the people who are actually designing and installing the equipment have to be knowledgeable and have to be able to apply the newest and best available technology, which is not easy. That's why the EU is in cooperation with our servicing association is running a program for skilling, for e-learning of technicians and servicing companies to really roll out the best technologies. And that's certainly in particular true also for India, where perhaps the involvement of the informal sector is even stronger than in Europe, where we nevertheless have this challenge identified. So that's certainly something we would be also willing to cooperate with India. And there, Edwin mentioned and mentioned in particular our bilateral projects, where we certainly would make this as a main topic of cooperation in the area of cooling. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, I heard something interesting about awareness and awareness raising versus mandatory standards. So it's very interesting to know what the EU is doing in order to see what we can do also in India. So now I would like to give the floor for one or two questions. If you are interested, please raise your hand and bring comments or questions.
How can we implement these green cooling methods in existing buildings? And how can we promote that, encourage our stakeholder, particularly our finance department, who is there to accept our proposal for giving us the money for going for green cooling, so that we can go for implement green cooling in existing buildings where we have a lot of challenge and limitation. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think retrofitting anytime is harder than I think doing it right the first time. So, but having said that, I would say that in terms of retrofitting large air conditioning plants, which are being run by chillers or packaged air conditioners, there are definitely examples and models that are being used with the help of energy audits and third-party financing and ESCOs coming in and executing those projects. I think that is one way that is happening. I think in terms of the payback and in terms of how to convince the finance people or the procurement people of the benefits of that, they will tend to look at, I think, what's the return on investment. And sometimes I think the return on investments are pretty good. I mean, they could be like 3 to 5 years, which is still providing you, I think, more than a 20% return on investment. So the challenge has been that how do you articulate it? I think how much time does it take, and whether the competency and I think the project management expertise of some of the companies who are stepping up, I think that has also been cause for concern. But my sense is that there are more and more examples of those companies coming forward and doing it. In terms of other, I think, operation and maintenance aspect, there has been some discussions about training. I think what kind of facility managers you have, what kind of central plant operators do you have, so that you can maintain and run the central plant at peak efficiency, because that is another area where how you are, I think, evaluating your initial energy efficiency levels and what is the actual energy efficiency level. So that is something that I also feel that there is room for improvement there. And last thing I would say that in terms of residential setup, the role of the technicians, I think when they come and do the annual maintenance contracts, when they change the refrigerants, how that is getting installed, and how do you ensure that the cooling that is being delivered by, I think, standalone units like room air conditioners, split air systems. I think that is also very, very important. So if you have more benchmarks where you can say that, okay, the total initial capacity of the equipment was this much, and based on the testing that we are doing, this is now only 5% degraded after 3 years or 10 years. If we have those kind of things, which a normal customer can actually follow very easily, then that will also help actually in maintaining and operating these air conditioning equipment at peak efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I wanted also to stress on the point about the importance of maintenance, about the skills of the companies installing and designing those systems to find options to improve an existing system. Sometimes it can be sufficient to clean the heat converter to gain 20% of energy efficiency. So again, skill, knowledge is absolutely key. There is no one-fits-all solution. Every building has to be looked at and assessed in terms of potential for saving, also in the existing. And it's India has now an opportunity with the expected new construction and new design of buildings to perhaps move away from traditional technology approaches, to use refrigerant-free cooling technologies, using absorption, using solar panels or photovoltaic to view them. So there are many options, and that's a certain opportunity to avoid the need for cooling and to come to better and perhaps innovative approaches.
So I would like to inform that, sorry, but I would like to inform that Professor Lal would like to add a small point on that.
Yeah, so I suspect that your query has to do a lot with old buildings going into air conditioning. Could it have something to do with that? Or buildings that already are air conditioned but need to go into green air conditioning. But I just want to add something about there's a lot of government building stock. And even institutional buildings all across the country which are now going to go into air conditioning. So I think there's a case for having budgets for upgrade of the building envelope, windows and insulation, roof and walls, to first reduce the ingress of heat and to keep the moisture and the heat out. First, spend on that, reduce your demand for air conditioning, then go for green air conditioning. That's a strong recommendation.
Thank you very much. Rajiv, you wanted to have
So, Cornelius, just one question to you. I think I'm just taking it forward what he said. For new construction, going for green cooling and all that is fine. There are different strategies, policy mandates, creating markets and all that. But when we talk about the existing consumers, what is your experience, European experience, that because if I'm an existing consumer, what is the motivation for me to go for green refrigerants and all that? From where I'm coming here is we are parallelly working a AC replacement program with few utilities. And one of the manufacturers came up with the idea that they want to go for some kind of, they can offer replacing the refrigerants with the green refrigerants or whatever we say. One thing which we are not able to maybe find as of now is that what is the interest or motivator for the consumer? What is the benefit do they have? So do you have some experience from Europe that how did you manage the existing consumers?
That's indeed an interesting question. Retrofitting is difficult, but that also depends on the setting and the design of the system. You may have cases where you operate a more centralized, a larger system, which needs to to be maintained from time to time. And if there is a replacement, then you would make use of opportunities to increase energy efficiency. There is not a program to replace existing single split units. That's more the market and our energy efficiency legislation, which makes sure that once it is replaced, a better energy efficiency level is available. So it's rather at this stage where the smaller units are addressed.
Okay, so thank you for this very interesting exchange. I fear that for time reasons we have to now directly switch to our last session. So our last session would be a bit more multiple. We are talking about technical aspects. We're also talking about financial aspects. First, I would like to encourage Professor Lal to take the floor. I would like to ask you to keep to 3-minute intervention. Thank you.
I just want to briefly look at the immediate concerns and response to immediate concerns, and then also at the long-term opportunities, and reflecting on some of the conversations we've had already in this morning. On the immediate front, I think it's very important to emphasize that as we explode into huge building construction right across the subcontinent, we are talking about an embodied energy explosion. The sheer production of material in buildings is going to be much more impactful in terms of carbon dioxide emissions than operational energy of these new buildings. Most of them are going to be simple buildings. But that's going to be the big thing. So that's one. The second is that the way in which cities' bylaws are being framed today and city planning regulations are being framed today, there is a push towards taller and taller buildings, which become inherently heavy on embodied energy, principally due to the consumption of steel. If for tier 2 and tier 3 cities, leave alone the big cities, let's say, you are to have regulations or planning principles that produce cities 3 to 4 stories high, you'll bring down the embodied energy on those buildings by 15 to 20% compared to the tall structures. And this is something that has to be addressed at the planning level. It's a great opportunity, and it's a matter of immediate concern because it means revisiting the policy on this front. Similarly, I would say there is a need to see the potential of solar PV integration into buildings. We have done calculations to show that when you have 4-story high buildings and you've got simple living under in those 4 floors, if you develop 50 to 60% of the roof area to catch the solar energy, you can meet 80% of electricity demand annually. So urban fabric systems that produce a low carbon potential, capturing solar energy, is what we have to move towards. That's an immediate concern and a strategy that must be put into place. Now, important also is while we do this, design is as important as selection of materials and technologies. The configuration of buildings themselves produce, through passive design, comfort within. It is not simply the materials, it's the configuration also. So that has to be important. And I want to make sure that the consumer, the end user, is now aware that he or she deserves a comfortable home. She deserves a comfortable home. It can be designed, it can be produced, it can be built at practically no extra cost. That person must know this and begin to demand it. I think that's a big gap in our entire publicity campaign. Moving on to longer distance considerations, long-term considerations, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of collaboration between, across the globe, especially between Europe and India. I'll cite 2 significant examples. One is the notion of using the available clay in the entire Indo-Gangetic Plain and many other such riverine plains huge resource that we have. We only need to learn to use it more sustainably, producing construction materials out of clay at low energy costs, at low carbon dioxide emissions. The example of Germany and the Netherlands is fantastic. You can really learn from that. How come this trade survives? And how come we are saying that you're going to switch over from brick? It's an available resource. In fact, when you talk to the circular economy, you know, the circular economy has its limitations. If you're going to expand your construction to 3 or 4 times what we have today, you can't work with the circular economy. New material has to be produced. And I would say research and collaboration in the development of clay products for construction is a big gap and needs to be really worked forward. 1 minute. Last one. Little further. Timber and biomass. It was a knowledge that was imbued in this country some centuries back. We have totally lost it. The day we lost our forests, we turned away from timber. The world is returning to timber and biomass as construction materials. It's totally lost now. Another area for collaboration to prepare for the next 2 or 3 decades. The resources have to be developed, techniques have to be learned again, and the high degrees of efficiency, the harvesting of timber, the generation of timber for construction purposes is something that must start on this subcontinent today, and the skills and knowledge for it have to be grown within. That's my recommendation.
Thank you so much. I would like to add my own example of how to do proper design by mentioning Le Corbusier, who built in Chandigarh buildings which were designed as not using any external AC. So it's and it dates back from the 50s, so meaning that we have nice examples in India of proper design of construction regarding energy efficient building. So I would like now to switch to the next speaker. Next speaker is Ms. Shruti Narayan from IFC. I'm very glad she's here because at least she's bringing some element of gender compliance into this panel. So, and of course, there is also the fact that you're working for AFC, meaning that it's time now to speak a bit about financial aspects within the green building subject. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to be towards the end of a panel discussion because so much pertinent topics have already been covered that you don't have to sort of add much. But coming from IFC, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, I would like to say that I would like to make 2 points. So IFC believes, one of our strong mandates is creating markets. So we think that all issues and problems around the world, and our focus has always been climate change and poverty reduction and access to prosperity of people, is that if you can create markets, you can resolve the problem. And markets are created by collaboration between different stakeholders, and many of which have spoken before and are in the audience, that you need the government to collaborate with the private sector, you need the consumers to come on board. So you need collaboration to create markets to sort of unlock the economic potential that's there. So that's the kind of, the way we have been looking at the problem around green building and climate change is to how we can create markets and do capital infusion and create instruments like financial instruments that can actually help some of these issues to get resolved. And the other thing that I want to say is that often people start thinking when you talk about creating markets is that you're actually moving away, you're talking about scale. I just want to clarify that I don't think so we're talking about scale, we're talking about viability. And viability is important. So you have to look at how you can create scale, and especially in the complex context that India is, where there are so many regional variation, is that how do you keep that in context? So especially even looking at sort of energy and cooling and materials, how can you sort of retain that regional aspects and context with getting scale? So, I can just kind of cite a quick example. We've been working with, IIT Chennai and Saint Cobain Research Institute on a project that's actually supported by the European Union, which is looking at scaling up green buildings in India in identifying new materials. So one of the materials that we've identified is GFRG, which is glass fiber reinforced gypsum that is actually using waste gypsum. So it's also looking at reduction in embodied energy, but it's also looking at a very forward-thinking problem of how to sort of reduce time. Like how can you reduce time also in your building? So how do you bring all that together in identifying sort of new problems in creating markets? The second thing that I want to put across is something that got sort of vaguely covered, and I think was consumer awareness. So there were questions around with, Rajiv and Smita brought up that, we've been talking about awareness, but how come we are still sitting here? I mean, I've been in this industry, I can say over a decade, and I've been around and talking about the same issues, actually, different people, different kind of issues, but it's been around. And I think we believe in the World Bank that consumer awareness is very, very important. The fact that, Rajiv mentioned that how do you pitch a refrigerant that's better is the fact that, 4 days ago, we heard that the Himalayan glaciers are going to be no more in 80 years. So if you put that across to someone, I don't think so there is going to be an issue in deciding. So we look at consumer awareness in two ways, in economic perspective and health. And I think if you start pitching consumer awareness in that aspect to different consumers, you can actually resolve the problem of climate change, because it's no more a question of selection, it's what you need to do to actually live. So it's as basic as that. So I think, and also once you start looking at consumer awareness, the ability to take risk, which is the third thing that I want to talk about, is risk, which comes in all markets. It's in financing, like I know, my colleague who's going to be talking is from NHP, who's going to be talking about how we can take risks and scale up the market. I think when you increase consumer awareness at different levels, the government, the private sector, the consumers, your ability to taking risks increases, which allows you to actually innovate, experiment, and reach sort of a level of scale that you're looking at for things to happen. And I think that's the way to resolve that issue. So I would like to end with that. I think that we are on the right track with a lot of collaboration that's already happening, and I think that we will be coming up with solutions soon, because this issue is very real.
Thank you very much. I now wanted to give the floor to our last panelist, last but not the least, because National Housing Bank, I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Miriala from National Housing Bank, given the fact that there is a very interesting European intervention already beginning its implementation with NHB, with a funding from French Development Agency and a funding from EU, a total 112 million euro regarding how to finance affordable housing. So I will give you the floor, Mr. Mayera.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Good afternoon, respected dignitaries on the stage and participants and organizers. It's our privilege to be part of this summit to deliver a lecture on what NHB has been proposing to take part in this initiative of Sunroof Housing Program or Green Housing Program, whatever you call it as. So, well, we have been talking about the importance of green housing, the importance of preservation of the energy resources. So everybody is convinced, but how to take it forward? Some financier has to come. They have to take up the project. They have to support. So we at NHB, we are ready to do that. As you are aware that, just let me talk about what NHB is. NHB is an apex financial institution for housing set up by an Act of Parliament and is fully owned by Reserve Bank of India as of now. So our basic motto was to promote housing in the country, and we have to bring in new initiatives and new technologies into the sector of housing, which were under nascent stage and which requires special attention and support through regulatory or as well as on financial aspects. So the banks, we regulate the housing finance companies, and besides, we also provide significant developmental finance towards affordable housing in the country. We seek to intervene in the sectors and segments which require special attention. So as we are discussing this green housing and green building concept, so NHB is ready to partner with that. And in past also we have partnered with the Department for International Development, DFID UK, and on the subject that making affordable housing sustainable for India, and also with KfW Germany for energy efficient residence residencies in India. So on both these projects, there was a very good response from the participants, from the all stakeholders, and with the same motive and with the same initiative, we have taken forward with AFD for financing this green housing under a program called SUNREF, Sustainable Use of Natural Resources and Energy Finance. So under that collaboration, along with AFD, we have entered into an MOU for a line of credit of 100 million euros. So we entered into agreement in 2017, and we have availed that facility from AFD in the month of December. So it is around approximately 800 crores, and 50% of that amount, that is 400 crores, is earmarked for EWS and LIG housing. As you are aware that this green housing and green building, every energy efficient housing, so there is a wrong concept in the minds of the people that these are pertaining to the high income strata and luxury living. But NHB is the first institution to bring it forward to the middle class and economically weaker sections, so that we wanted to give a big boost for its usage, and so that the energy resources can be saved significantly. So there is a scheme. Now we have been partnered with AFD. So the financing cost would be a bit cheaper than other ways of refinance available from NHB, because there is a grant component provided by them. So we are ready to take forward, and we have also have a technical component, and under that technical component there is a technical consultant will be on board, and they would be helping us in building capacities and creating awareness among the people and builders, architects, engineers and developers for planning and design and construction of the green buildings. So this is only one such program. NHB will not stop with this. We are looking forward to take it forward further. This is only just a demonstrative project. So we at NHB, we commit ourselves to introduce similar programs which enhances the quality of the habitat in the country, and also we are committed for the development of the affordable housing, and we are committed to provide housing for all by 2022 by constructing 2 crore houses. So in order to do that, there is a greater need that we have to follow all these principles, and we have to preserve our resources, and we have to move accordingly. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So before concluding this session, I wanted to take once again 1 or 2 questions from the floor. So I see one person over there, please.
One little observation, especially after I heard Mr. Ashok Bilal's address. We are talking about green buildings, sustainable buildings, and also you touched that we should again rethink about timber. But India being the second largest producer of bamboo, having 103 bamboo species, nobody has talked about bamboo. And bamboo, if China has been so successful in using bamboo as a really mode of, for construction purposes, why can't India do it? I don't see government, I don't see private sector, I don't see civil society ever touching this point. We have 103 species, and all these species can be used in construction, in building houses in one way or the other. And we have really such good natural resource. So I really don't know why we are not talking, why financial institutions are not building products for development of timber or usage of timber. I really don't know. Maybe I will get some answers from you. Thank you.
So,
I can just say quickly, I know Professor Lal will add that there is a whole national bamboo mission. I don't know if you're, I don't know about, okay, well, but we've interacted a little bit, not from the World Bank, but I've interacted with them before. And they're doing a lot of work in Northeast in identifying, and also in Madhya Pradesh in looking at technologies on how bamboo can be looked at from scale. But
I basically want to echo the same comment that there is a national mission, bamboo mission, which is currently in place. And it is looking at various, in fact, the Griha Council during the Griha Summit has collaborated. They have probably not been able to reach out that successfully to the sustainable community in the built environment, but they have collaborated with us to make sure that the bamboo gets the position that you raised, ma'am. So with that, I think I just leave it there and we can take it offline. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't communicate my point sufficiently. It's timber and other biomass. It could be grasses and bamboos. Altogether, this is going to be the only set of renewable resource that you're going to have in the future. And if you don't develop that capability now, you're going to be sunk.
My question is to Manohar. So I was at DFID and I designed that low-income housing program, the one you're speaking of. And I recall at that time we had to substantially subsidize the financing to the developers for this program. Now, if you are bringing in, and we couldn't really bring in a lot of green measures because of the cost issue. So now things have changed. That was in 2012. So now things have changed. Are you now for incentivizing green low-income housing? Do you have to up the subsidy, or has there been some changes in terms of using more sustainable indigenous material, and have there been some positive developments there?
Yeah, like DFID in AFD also, as I told you, there is a grant component. So the benefits of which would be passed on to the on-lending institutions, and they would be passing on the benefit to the ultimate home borrowers. So we have created the scheme promoting green housing refinance scheme, PGHRS. So the scheme is in two parts. One part is towards the refinance to the PLIs who will be lending towards the individual households. So who are falling in the ranks of lower EWS, LIG and MIG with the incomes of 3 lakhs per annum, 6 lakhs and 18 lakhs per annum. So we are likely to adjust that eligibility criteria. And PGHRS2, under second part, it is like construction financing. Like housing finance companies, they can lend to the PLIs which are involved in the construction finance, which would be ultimately given for habitation by the individual residents. So in that case also, but the prerequisite is that they should be Griha rated 4-star or 5-star rating and IGBC gold or platinum rated. So this pre-qualification is also a requirement. But despite all of this, but there is an incentive for the home loan buyer, because the interest cost, whatever is there, is going to be subsidized, and it is much more going to be lower than what they would have availed in a normal general refinance. So that's what we can ensure.
Thank you. I guess it's time now to conclude this session. I will not do that alone. I would like to ask my fellow panelists to each of them in turn say with one phrase what is their main recommendation regarding sustainable building in India. So please, Jake, you will begin.
I'll do even better. I'll use one word. Fast.
I would say that fast and affordability and scale. I think a lot of the discussions have focused on solutions. One of the things that I would probably like to see, I don't think I have a solution to that, is that there are lots of sustainable building design and technologies available. I think the discussions most of the time gets stuck in that are we doing small scale pilot projects, or can these things be scaled rapidly? I think a lot of ministries face these issues, face these challenges, and if we can come as a community together to do that, I think the last question on bamboo was also related to that. I think that would really help move the needle on sustainable building design and green construction.
So just one phrase, please.
One phrase or one word?
One phrase, or as you like.
Okay. Collaborative way. So that we can work together, and only one person is, or one organization is not required. Everybody is required to do this. So,
maybe a few more words. See the trends, which way they're going today, get real, and take action to change them.
For reducing the impacts of cooling, in the same time fulfilling and satisfying the increasing cooling demand, we have to take a holistic approach and bring all actors on board, including those who are actually putting the hands on the building, the equipment, and actually doing the job, they are the most important people to know. They have to know what they are doing.
So it's good for you, good for the planet.
So what I feel is that as of now, the most of the energy consumption, electricity costs are subsidized by the state, that is the government, either central or state government. So in the common home buyer will not look at all these costs initially. So there is a need for us in terms of the long-term savings. There is a great need for this, and they should realize it, and we have to take it forward further.
Thank you. So now it's time for me to finish. I would just, I will make a very brief summary. What we learned today, I guess, is very useful for all the persons present in this assistance. First of all, of course, there is a big challenge raised by how building is contributing to the climate change, meaning that we have to address this challenge by all means possible. And in order to do that, I heard from the panelists three different points which seem to me very important. First one is technical, of course, because we do have to find proper ways, local ways to find sustainable and energy efficient construction. Design is very important, but also all the solutions we heard today about cool roofs, about green cooling, about retrofitting, all of this has to be done, integrating solar energy. I take your point. Local construction material, I think this is very important to integrate since the design, but also for the retrofitting, all these local solutions. So because then you have more resource efficiency, and then it will cost you less at the end of the day. Second point is about institutional aspects, also very important. There was a very interesting discussion going on regarding do we have to impose things on people, or do we have to do things to increase their awareness? I guess both are important, but awareness is a very crucial part. Everybody mentioned the fact that it's necessary to raise this awareness at the level of the end users, because if they are not requesting for green building, it will be very difficult to impose that on them. And in order to do that, a lot of soft actions have to be launched, awareness raising, but also training, skill development, and also development of proper standards from BE. It's very important. We have a lot of nice standards here. We have to make sure that they are implemented. And finally, I would like to conclude by the financial part, because as a financier myself, it's our role to make sure that people find, at the end of the day, the right financial solutions to have their affordable green housing. And for that, initiative like what IFC is doing, but also what NHB is doing is very important. I know there are some private developers here in the room, so you know that this program is being launched in order to make sure that for the end user, a green building, energy efficient building comes at the same cost as what was before so-called normal non-efficient building. So I guess with these three main points I took from this panel, I wanted to say a very warm thanks to my colleague panelists. It was very nice to have you around and to hear your deep insights. I guess we can all have a good round of applause for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas, and speakers for your thoughtful suggestions and comments. I would now request Mr. Nicholas Finaj to hand over the moment of appreciation to Mr. Rajiv Rilhan. These are the homegrown herbs of Terry Soupy, the nanobiotechnology department. The nanobiotechnology department have helped the villagers of Uttarakhand to grow these herbs. To Mr. Saurav Didi. Mr. Jake Schmidt. Dr. Satish Kumar, Mr. Cornelius Reen, Professor Ashok B. Lal, Ms. Shruti Narayan. Yeah, please. Mr. Manohar Mirela. I would also request Mr. Sanjay Seth, Mr. Edwin, and Mr. Rajiv to please join the panelists for one group picture. And I also request Mr. Sanjay Seth to please hand over the moment of appreciation to our moderator for the theme today.